Hundreds of thousands of protesters rallied Saturday evening across the country in Israel as part of ongoing demonstrations against the government's contentious judicial overhaul, with tensions mounting ahead of Memorial Day and Israel's 75th Independence Day that will be marked this Tuesday and Wednesday. At the main protest in Tel Aviv, members of bereaved families set up a makeshift memorial with candles to commemorate fallen soldiers. Families urged politicians to stay clear of cemeteries on Memorial Day, which begins Monday at nightfall and ends Tuesday evening with the start of Independence Day. Police said around 20 of the protesters entered Tel Aviv's Ayalon Highway near Hashalom Junction, but were quickly dispersed by officers.
I'm coming here every Saturday, and this Saturday is more important because on Wednesday we have our Independence Day, and one day before that is the Memorial Day. My father was killed on Yom Kippur War, it was in '73, and I was growing up without a father because he gave his life for this country, because he was raised up also with the belief that it's going to be a democracy, an independent country after Israel, and the Jewish people have suffered so much. And when I see what is going on this time, it's terrible. It's the least I can do.
There is this sentence from the Bible, from David's lamentation, saying how heroes fell, and actually the question is now turned, instead of how heroes fell, to for what.
Chief of the Israeli Defense Forces, Lieutenant General Herzog has called on Sunday for Israelis to show respect on upcoming Memorial Day and not to turn military cemeteries into a scene of debate. That's amid heightened tensions over the government's plans to overhaul the judiciary. There has been growing speculation that ministers from the hardline government will be heckled and face protests while participating in upcoming Memorial Day ceremonies, as bereaved families warn them to stay away from the ceremonies, saying that the radical right-wing opinions are not welcomed. In a commentary published by the IDF, Halevi said Memorial Day establishes a deep connection between the personal and the national. This year, precisely in the shadow of tensions, we must focus on the personal memorial and wrap ourselves in its humane power. We must all respect the cemeteries and not turn them into a scene of debate. President Isaac Herzog described Israel's internal societal rift over the government's halted judicial overhaul as the most serious internal crisis in the country's history, but expressed hope that compromise talks would produce a result. In a round of TV interviews set to be aired Sunday night, Herzog said that if compromise talks between the government and opposition heads fail, he knows who to blame, he said, without mentioning any names. This historic responsibility needs to be recorded somewhere, Herzog told Channel 13. We're now joined in studio by Ambassador Daniel Shek. He's Israel's foreign ambassador to France and a political commentator here on I-24 News, and our Jonathan Regev, defense correspondent. Thank you both for coming into the studio. We'll start with you, Ambassador Shek. How rare is it to see such an op-ed by Herzog Levi or by any chief of staff of the Israeli military a moment before Independence Day and Memorial Day?
It's very simple. It's as rare as the situation we have found ourselves in. It's very rare. And when you see all the leadership of the country, military and political, scrambling to call upon the general public to maintain a certain level of, I don't know how to, of decency in their in the way they will behave in these ceremonies of Memorial Day, which truly is sort of the inner sanctum of Israeli patriotism, of Israeli identity. This closeness between Memorial Day and the celebration of our independence are, in a nutshell, the identity of modern Israel. And if this is being, how should I put it, if this is being touched by the tensions that reign in the country now, that just tells you how deeply they run. I'm not sure that these calls will be fully heard.
And how divided the country is. Jonathan, what is the army going to do? I mean, there's 2-3 days. Actually, tomorrow night events begin, Monday evening. Operatively, is there anything that the IDF is doing in order to make sure that on the ground things run in a specific way? Are there any plans?
I don't think the army can do much, because this is at the end, this is not up to the army. Tomorrow evening, Monday evening, we're looking at a main ceremony at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. That ceremony will probably not be touched, simply because this is a ceremony where politicians do not come. The president speaks there, the chief of staff speaks there, but we do not see the prime minister or the ministers attending that specific ceremony. There's also not a lot of crowds. Tuesday morning at the cemeteries, that's a different issue. There's a main ceremony in Mount Herzog in Jerusalem where the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense are attending, and bereaved families. Will they have comments? Perhaps. What right do we have to silence bereaved families? I think we do not have that right, as difficult as that opinion may be. And if you remember last year, when Naftali Bennett was Prime Minister, in that main ceremony in Mount Herzog, he was heckled a little bit, because there were also a lot of criticisms on that government as well. And there were calls, a few, but there were. And Naftali Bennett sat there and took it in and did not respond, saying that he has no right to answer to a bereaved family. How will the politicians react now? That's a question. When we're speaking of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and also Defense Minister, especially Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, they have an extensive military record. But how can you expect bereaved families to accept ministers coming from parties such as the United Torah Judaism or Shas, who explicitly do not go to the army and advocate for their public not to go to the army?
It's not the first time in history that we've had ministers in the government or in the cabinet from those ultra-Orthodox parties.
True, but this is the first time in which they're a main core in the Israeli coalition. And National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir will be attending, as far as I understand, the military cemetery in the city of Beersheba. Itamar Ben-Gvir did not go to the army. In his case, not because he did not want to go to the army. He did want to go, but since he had criminal convictions, even talks that he was part of what was called back then a terror cell, the army did not want him to attend. How will families accept him?
Criminal, I think 8 accounts, no?
8 accounts, yes, but
out of them supporting a terror organization.
But it's not as if he said, I do not want to go to the army. It's the army which did not draft him. There's no debate on the fact that he was not a soldier in the army. Whose fault, let's call it this way, is it? That's another question. Families all across the country, some of them will perhaps not be very happy with it, and as Ambassador Shek said, this shows the great divide within our society.
We have less than a minute left. A word from you about the alternative ceremony that we will see on Tuesday.
Yeah. Well, the alternative ceremony, you mean the...
On Kaplan, demonstrators are going to gather.
Yes, so that's part of a different contest between supporters and detractors of the judicial reform. There are 2 big demonstrations planned, one by the protesters on Tuesday, and one the next night, or on Thursday, I believe, by supporters of the government. And there's going to be comparisons. But I think that, just a word to what Jonathan just said.
We have 15 seconds.
The worst part is that some of these politicians have had very bad words about the army, and that is what has made a difference between this year and other years.
Ambassador Daniel Shek, Jonathan Regev, thank you very much.